Hey guys, Stephen Cox here, and today we're going to be talking about 5 different techniques that we can use to make our solos more interesting and to make solo bass arrangements as well. So if you like videos like these, please subscribe below and consider becoming a patron. And let's jump right into it. So we've got 5 different techniques, and I'm just going to do a brief overview of all of them real quick. We've got the double thump technique. And you can combine it with other things. We've got tapping, which I'm sure you're familiar with. Where we use both hands to play notes by just hammering on. Hey, Robert, how's it going? And then we've got a backbeat slap. Hey, John, I bet that's confusing to other people because they think I'm calling you the wrong name. But how are you doing? All right. And so then we've got raking. How you can use that. And then we've got a 3-finger technique. And kind of as a bonus, you could also do like ukulele style or guitar style finger picking. So you can do that, which isn't normally a bass technique. It's normally more like a guitar technique or ukulele technique. So we'll jump into that and talk about each one, starting with the double thump. So if you're not familiar with the double thump and you're not familiar with Victor Wooten, either one of them really, basically Victor Wooten likes to use his thumb almost like a pick. That's where you go down and up with your thumb. So you use it kind of like a guitar pick, just go through the string and come back up. So one of the tricks to it is when you go through the string, stop on the string below it. So see how I'm like going through the string. I'm kind of just putting a little bit of force, not quite as hard as a slap or anything. But you can kind of just go through it like that, stop on the string below, and come up. And I'm hitting it with just the edge of the fingernail. The less you hit it with, the better, because if you hit it with too much of the finger, it'll stick on the string, especially if you're doing the rubber strings. This technique is also just easier on the metal strings because you can give it a little bit more force on the upstroke without it kind of getting stuck under the string like that. So you got to be kind of accurate, just barely use a little bit of it, or you might slow down as you're going. But that is the idea. So just some exercises you can do is obviously what I'm doing right now, which is literally just go through the string, come up, go through the string, come up, go through the next string, come up, go through the next string, come up, and so forth. You can go backwards, down, up, down, up, down, up, down, up, down, up, down, up. And then you just work that up to speed. LC, thank you. I appreciate that. You just got the Hadeen. Somebody actually posted a video with the pronunciation of that. I think it was Hadeen. So I'm going to start calling it Hadeen for now instead of Hadian or Hadeen or whatever else I was calling it. I think it's just Hadeen. But now we know, I think, according to a YouTube video. But thank you. And I'm glad they're easy to follow. So we've got the double thump. So after we go down and up with the thumb, we can do some more techniques with it, like what Victor Wooten would do in certain songs. So after going down with the thumb, we could hammer onto a note. If we're doing an open string, you could hit the open E string, then hammer onto the 3rd fret, which hammering on just means putting enough force down to have the note sound without having to do anything with the other hand. Which this is easier on rubber strings because you don't really have to push down that hard. It's just a fast motion. It's called a hammer-on because think about the way a hammer would hit. But then after you hit, hold it down rather than releasing like a percussive instrument. Just hold it down. So you could go down, hammer, and then you could come up with the thumb afterwards. Down, hammer, up. So that's kind of a cool way to play fast. It works a lot better on the thinner strings, on the rubber strings, but you can really do it on any string. And just because the metal strings have a little bit more tension, it's easier to do. You may want to play really lightly when you do this on the rubber strings. So that's something you can do with it. And then you can combine it with popping. Victor Wooten compares it to like a banjo technique. I think he gave Bela Fleck credit for showing him what he does on the banjo and just trying to apply it to bass. So you could go down, up, pluck on the same string. So in order to do that, I'm having my finger almost tucked behind like that so that they're about the same height when I'm playing. So whatever angle your thumb is, if you have a hitchhiker's thumb, you might have to have your finger further over so that it's just level, if that makes sense. So that both of those, where you're plucking here and where your thumb is hitting the string, are level or almost level. Maybe you want the pointer finger to be a little bit lower down. And it's actually easier to do if you combine these with octaves and skip over a string, because if you're skipping over a string, then your fingers don't have to be level and cramped together like that. So it's a little bit easier to me to go down, hammer on, up, pluck, or just down, up, pluck. So I'm playing the 3rd fret on the A string. I'm just going to do the down, up, pluck one, leave out the hammer on for now. So we go 3rd fret on the A string, down, up, and then follow it by a pluck on the G string. I'm using my middle finger. Or I'm doing the 5th fret on the G string, so I've got that octave. So that's kind of a cool technique that you can use. And sometimes I like to even add another one in there. Since there's a string in the middle, I could use my pointer finger to get the D string and my middle finger to get the G string. I could go down, up, pluck, pluck. Yep, and I could also play more accurately by not playing directly over the frets, but playing in the middle. But you get the point. So that's the idea. So does anybody have any questions about that? I'm just going to say real quick that the hardest thing about that is just getting the consistency. If you're doing the down, up, pluck, pluck, getting all those in time, I would suggest going really slow at first. Just go like down, up, pluck, pluck, until you get a flow with it, to where your hand knows exactly how far to space each one out so that you don't have to move as far to get each note to sound. And then you can kind of get that kind of thing going. And it's just a really cool effect if you're trying to add a texture to something. If you're doing like a solo piece, it stays kind of busy, so you're filling out the sound a little bit. Okay, so next we have tapping. I'm sure you're all a little bit familiar with tapping. You can do the Eddie Van Halen style on one string. Or you could do two-handed tapping where you play more like a piano if you wanted to. Right, it's kind of hard to make something up as you do that, but that's kind of the idea. The intonation on the U bass makes it a little bit hairy when you're doing that kind of thing, where you're playing low and high at the same time, because the high notes will probably be a little bit out of tune. Okay, so with tapping, all we're doing is the idea that we were doing with the hammer-on before, only we don't have to hit a note before the hammer-on. So literally, you just go from nothing happening to pushing a note down, and that's it. So things to note here, you want to be very accurate. You want to make sure that your finger comes down right in between the frets, not too far forward, not too far behind. If you do it too far behind, you'll get some fret buzz. If you do it too far forward, I don't know, you might mute the string a little bit, but really right in between, you'll get the best tone. On the metal strings, you may want to be slightly forward, but not in front of the piece of metal. And do you see what I'm saying? Forward, closer to the body within this space created by these two frets. So like right here, might be a little too far forward, but if you're in the upper half of it, it's pretty good. On the rubber strings, I'd recommend just being right in the middle. You'll probably get a better tone out of that. Okay, so that's what our left hand would do. Practice doing it with different fingers, build up some strength. You could do those warm-up exercises, but just do the hammer-on version, the tapping version. You just do 4 frets in a row, 1 with each finger. So that'll build up a little bit of finger strength and get you used to that. The other thing to remember is however long you want the note to ring out after doing the tap, you got to hold it down for that long. So you don't want to like immediately let go or you'll get that kind of sound. Just hold it down as long as you want the note to ring out. Okay, and then with the right hand, sorry, I got carried away there. With the right hand, you just do the same exact thing, only we're coming from the other side of the bass. So instead of being underneath it and going this way, we're doing a similar motion, almost like this. So it's kind of like you're flinging your wrist down and then keeping the note there. So you can see, like, if I do that, it kind of makes a thud. If I were to do that on like a knuckle. So you want that kind of sound, but then you want to just leave your finger down. And you don't have to do it super hard on the rubber strings, but you have to do it harder with this hand than the left hand because you're closer to the end of the string and this part of the string isn't going to resonate as loudly. But it doesn't have to be super hard. And you want to be right in the middle. That was an example I was too far forward where it was kind of muting it a little bit. But if I'm right in the middle, whoops, how if I looked at it? Then it rings out very nice and clear. So the hard part about this, of course, is accuracy, especially if you're playing between one hand and the other. So that's something to keep in mind. So the 2 types of tapping are that piano style where we're doing a different melody and a different bass line, which is the trickier kind, right? Right? Or you can do the kind where we're on one string. Or you can do another kind that's sort of in between where you still are only doing one note at a time. But you're having to, you're kind of having to use both hands just very, very, what's the word? Precisely. You're having to use them in a certain order. So you're going like a couple with the left hand, a couple with the right hand, maybe one with the left hand, then back. So these are patterns you just have to like get into your muscle memory to be able to do fast. So, so that's the other kind of tapping. But let me digress and go back to the Eddie Van Halen style. What we're doing here is we're tapping a note like that. So we're holding it down. And then we have our other hand ready on whatever note we're pulling it down to. Could be an open string. But what we're going to do is we're going to pull our finger kind of up slightly so that it plucks the string. You can tell the intonation's a little bit off. Other thing, when you're tapping, try to push directly into the fingerboard, because if you accidentally pull up while doing it, the note will go out of tune. Unless you're trying to bend it, in which case you could do that. But that's a whole other story. So just try to get it to go directly into the fingerboard, almost like if your finger were straight out here, that the momentum is going straight down, not at an angle or anything. So that's kind of our goal there. And then you pull it off to pluck the string basically. And then if you have these notes down here ready to go, if you want to pull off to a certain note, just go ahead and be holding this one down. Even before you're tapping, you can still hold it down if you want to. So hammer on, pluck down to that note that you've been holding down, hammer on, pluck down to a different note if you wanted to. And then another thing that you can add to this is you can do that hammer on, pull off / pluck, whatever you want to call it. And then you can do another hammer on with another finger on this hand. So that's kind of how Eddie Van Halen does a lot of the stuff in Eruption. That's not the particular chord that he's outlining, but you get the idea. So when you're doing this kind of stuff, one thing is you probably want to outline a arpeggio of some sort. So if you know how to do your arpeggios on one string, they sound really good, even a minor arpeggio. So you could just tap those. The minor. And so the hard part here is getting that coordination of the timing. So what I would recommend is go really slow, tap, pull off, hammer on, tap, get them very evenly spaced. All right. So I'm going to answer a few questions real quick. So thank you, Paula. I appreciate that. Jeremy, have I tried the black kala U-bass strings? So if you're talking about the pahoehoes, I think that's how you pronounce them, then yes, I borrowed a friend's U-bass that had one when I did the rubber versus round wound video where I had 2 exotic mahogany U-basses. So I did play those at that point. But aside from that, not very often. There might have been a couple at NAMM that I played. In fact, there definitely were that had those. But if you're not familiar with that, that's just like it's the North American Music Merchants Conference, which obviously they're canceling for this year due to the coronavirus, of course. But a couple years ago, because not this past year, but the year prior to that, I went and played a lot of different U-basses that they had, and several of them had those strings. So I got to pretty much try out all the different kinds of strings that they put on their instruments. So, sorry, long answer, but there you go. Oh, and thanks, Johnny. Appreciate that. So with this kind of tapping, it's all about coordinating the timing, probably evenly spacing out the notes in most regards, but that's the idea. You know, so you can do all that kind of stuff. It's a lot of fun. You can do it on different strings, but that type of tapping is easier when you're doing it on one string at a time. So you could do this pattern and then switch strings, but you're going to where all that whole pattern is on the D string, G string, and then D string. So the idea is you do the whole entire pattern on each string instead of kind of changing it up, you know, one string, then the other string, then the other string. You can't really do the hammer-ons and pull-offs as easily that way, or really at all the particular way that we're doing it. Okay, so that's one kind of tapping. Then we had the piano style tapping, which I really like, which is more like your left hand has a bass line and your right hand has a melody. What was it? Right? So you could make up a bass line here. We could keep it really simple and do something kind of like country instead of that arpeggio thing I was just doing. So we could just go like, so you just practice tapping that however long you want your notes to be. I also want to say that I'm flattening my hand out to mute the other strings so that they don't ring out while I'm playing. So you can just practice doing that with one hand. Figure out what your chord progression is. Root, fifth, root, fifth, new chord. So let's say that's our progression. So then we'd have a melody on the right hand, and whatever our melody is, I'm just going to make one up. I usually just tap that on the G string alone, unless there's a note that I can't get to on the G string and the other string is free to use. If the D string is free to use, sometimes I'll tap on the D string as well. So let's say our melody is. So let's see what happens here. So that's the idea. So we do what I would do to learn these kinds of things is do the left hand first, get the bass line down, then do the right hand by itself. Just that normal tapping thing that we're doing. And as you notice, the strings kind of rang out a little bit there. So I like using my hands to mute everything, but on harder songs, if it's just not possible to mute everything, that's when you see people put some sort of mute over here next to the nut. And so that could be like I mean, you could use anything. I've used toilet paper before where I just wedged, it's terrible to say, but I've used toilet paper where I just wedged it up here by the first fret. And then Victor Wooten likes using hair ties. So with him, you'll see a hair tie down there, and that's for muting mostly. Some people use those little sweatbands like you'd have on your wrist in the 80s. Some people would use those to mute. And then there are some things that look like those sweatbands that are just a little thinner and more designed specifically for this. And I think one of them is made by Groove Gear or something. I think I have one made by them, but it's pretty cool stuff. And you just use that to mute the strings so that they're not like if you were to mute your strings with the finger down here, see how they just don't ring out as loudly as, so that way, if they did happen to resonate a little bit, you wouldn't really notice it. So that's the idea there. And Navix 37 is going pretty good. We're just learning some techniques that are a little bit harder than what we normally do, but it's fun stuff. So, you know, if you take your time with it, it's not too hard, but it does take time to learn if you're brand new to it. Okay. So the third type of tapping that I like to do is kind of a combination of those two. You're only playing one note at a time, so you're not doing like a melody and a bass line simultaneously. I typically like doing this with arpeggios, and it sounds really cool if you do a minor arpeggio. So let's say you're doing the 7th fret on the E string, so that's a B, but we'll outline a B minor chord. So you'll do 7th fret on the E string, 5th fret on the A string, and notice I'm using like my ring finger for that first note and my pointer finger for the second note. Okay, then we're going to take our right hand, we're going to go to the 9th fret, and on the A string, we'll play the 9th fret with our pointer finger, and then with the middle finger, we'll do the 9th fret on the D string. So you can practice just doing that. And sometimes it's fun to put one more note on the end, and that one we would use our pinky to get. You could also do this with different fingers. You could do middle finger for the first note, pointer finger for the second note, still do the same thing with the right hand, and then use your ring finger to get the 7th fret on the G string. So that's the idea. You just go right up that chord. So that's root 3rd, 5th, root 3rd. If you know about basically what scale they come from, that's one way to look at it. Another way to look at it is just you're doing your arpeggio, then you're starting your arpeggio again down here. And you can keep going if you wanted to, but it makes it a little bit harder to do that. So we could just use this note up here. So once we go up it, and we stop there, what I like to do is just go 9 on the D string, 9 on the A string, and back to 9 on the D string. So and I like that pattern a lot because it gives you just enough notes to fill up a measure. One, if you're doing 8th notes, 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. Of course, you go really fast to really 16th notes. And then you can do different arpeggios as you go down, but it's just a way to play really fast without like totally exerting yourself and being kind of worn out afterwards. If I try to do that with just normal plucking, right, that'd be kind of hard. Yeah, see, it's kind of hard to do, especially with the rubber strings if your hands get a little bit sticky. But the tapping, much easier. And much less string noise because your fingers aren't like clicking on the strings as you're going. All right. So the reason I don't play the fret list when I'm teaching is because I often give you guys fret numbers. And with that particular fret list, there's just absolutely no way to tell what I'm doing because the dots are on the top of the neck rather than on the front. So it's literally just like a blank canvas. So it's not really a good teaching tool unless I'm teaching fret list specifically and ideas like hearing things in tune or something like that. So it's a little bit limited on what I can teach you because there are a lot of visual learners. I know that some of you guys are just learning by ear, and that's wonderful. And you get the concepts and everything. But there's just nothing tangible to latch on for the visual learners if I do the fret list because it's just a blank canvas. So you have to like look at the math behind it and everything rather than just going, oh, you're on the 3rd fret. Oh, you're on the 5th fret. So that's really the reason why I don't teach on the fret list very often, unless I might be teaching a fretless player or something, or if I'm teaching the double bass. Then sometimes I'll do that because you play in positions on there. On fretless bass, there are less positions that you really use. So on double bass, it makes sense to have positions because right when you get to the halfway through, the body is about where the 7th fret would be on here. So where the body starts up there, it's almost like if the body here went all the way down to there. So it's kind of like you have less that you have to be accountable for down here. And then when you go into a different position up there, you have thumb position and you can use the body to figure out what those other notes are. So you have reference points. Whereas with the fretless, the only reference points you have are the dots on top of the neck, unless you have one with fret markers, in which case you'd have those. So I know it was a long-winded answer, but that's the reason why I use the fretted ones for teaching. Okay, so that's tapping in a nutshell. I think we've covered about everything we can do there. Sorry, breathed in wrong. So we're going to move on to adding a backbeat to stuff. So let's say you're just doing a normal bass line and you don't have a drummer around, but you want it to feel like there are drums there. Well, a drummer typically hits the snare drum, you know, the one that pops. So I have the cajon just right outside of the screen right here. I'm actually using it as a table, but you can get that snare sound on beats 2 and 4 usually, and most pop and most rock, with very few exceptions really in the grand scheme of things, you're going to have that backbeat on 1, 2, 3, 4. So we can kind of slap the strings like I'm doing to imitate that snare drum. Doesn't sound exactly like it, but it's about as close as we can get right now, because drumming on this sounds like a different kind of drum, whereas that pop has a little bit more like a snare sound to it. But basically, just play a normal bass line. So let's pick a bass line like that classic blues bass line. And I'm just going to do the same thing there, but I'm going to hit beats 2 and 4. I'm kind of slapping the string. So this is a little bit harder way of doing it, where I'm actually like slapping the string and getting the note. So I'm really just like hitting the string hard enough to get that slap sound, but I'm also playing through the string so that it rings out. Get the idea? So that's something you could do. So you get the idea there. If you're playing something that just is a half note bass line, like you're playing a country style line, it's a lot easier to get started with this. Yeah, the coordination is really tricky on that one because you have to like play through the string and have your finger not hit that string while you're thinking about whatever your bass line is. So there's a ton of coordination with that. So that is true, Charlie. Okay. So now that we've got that, we could just do half notes. And And you could add this to a country line, and this is probably the easiest way to get started on this. You hit a note on beat 1. Let's do it on G, I guess. Hit beat 1. Then you can slap the strings all at the same time, or you can just pick to slap 1. Doesn't really matter. Either way. Just giving you both options there. So it's just slapping a single string and slapping all of them. So it's a little bit louder if you slap all of them, but it's harder to get your hand into that position and back out if you're doing that. So either one of those works. On an upright bass, it's easier to slap all the strings than just to slap one string. So it's more like an upright bass kind of skill there. Yeah. So start with that, because that's a good way to start with the coordination. And then you could work your way up to doing quarter note lines. And what I would do, rather than just jumping into doing the blues line and slapping on every other beat, what I would do instead is just play one note and then try to slap every second and fourth note. It does take a little coordination and a lot of practice. And once you've got that, then you can move it around. Add things to it like I was doing, but you don't have to. You could just stick with quarter notes. And then we've got you can do the same thing, but you can do it on like a funk bass line. So let's say our bass line's like, so it's just like, as long as you know where beat 2 and where beat 4 is, you know if you have to slap a note while playing or just slap a percussive note in between playing. In that case, I wasn't playing on beats 2 or 4 at all, so it made it easy. I'm trying to come up with one that's like a combination where maybe the first one you're not playing on, but the second one you are. So maybe like, you're tapping below the strings, you said? You could do that too if you wanted to. It's just quieter if you're tapping the wood rather than tapping the actual strings. But that is another thing that you can do. On upright bass, I kind of combine different sounds on the instrument. So you can kind of drum up here to get a different drum sound and then do the backbeat here. And when I do green tea, obviously I'm slapping in between. So you hear sometimes it's like that, and sometimes it's like, sometimes I'm having to hit a note and slap at the same time. All right, so real quick, I'm going to answer one more question because I like the questions that are coming up here. What's your favorite U-bass model? Well, that one's really, really tricky. Of the ones I own, probably the Journeyman, because I just like the way it looks. It's really just more about looks than sound on that one. The Exotic Mahogany is definitely the best quality instrument that I have of them. I imagine I would like the Ebony model a lot because I have an Ebony ukulele and I love the way it looks and I like the way it sounds. So I have a feeling I'd really like that one. And at some point, I'd like to get the Koa solid body model, and I just really like the way that one looks as well, and it sounds really cool also. Right, and Charlie says the Kala Cali, so the California custom shop, I'm assuming. Yeah, so those are really awesome, but I think I want to get the Koa of that series, so that's pretty cool. All right. So that is adding a backbeat slap. You can add it to funk grooves. You can add it anywhere else. But when I was doing Green Tea, that song, I was doing that and drumming on the body of the instrument. So right now I'm using my fingernails to tap on the instrument, which probably scratch it up. On the upright bass, I'm using the flat of my hand because it just actually, I can actually slap hard enough to actually get the sound out. I suppose I could do it up here too, but probably sounds good there. Let's see. Then you have to be really accurate and quick getting back to that note. So that's the trick there. So that's adding a backbeat slap on beats 2 and 4. Robert, that's a great question. I named my car is named Luna, but I don't know about the instruments. I have a Warrior bass, and I named that one Xena, because, you know, Xena Warrior Princess, for any of y'all that ever watched that. I didn't really watch that show much, but I still thought that since it was Warrior, I would name it Xena. But otherwise, not so much. I don't really think about it too much, but I probably should sometime. Awesome. Oh, and great deal at the $99 for the Hadeen. That's awesome. Congrats on that. Found a really good deal. Okay, so now we're going to talk about one that we hear more often in songs, whether we realize it or not. And this is called raking through the strings. So basically what you're doing here is you're using one finger at a time to go through multiple strings. So right here, literally I'm using one finger, and rather than plucking individually like that or anything, I'm literally pushing into the string so that when I get through one string, it stops on the next string, then do the same thing. And you can do it in one motion. So it's like literally you're just pulling your finger through the string. Works better if you have your thumb anchored somewhere. So you can rake through all 4 strings. Most raking motions that I see, people usually do 3 strings at a time. So if you're doing this root, 5th root, so like 3rd fret on the A string, 5th fret on the D string, and 5th fret on the G string, you could rake through them by just using one finger at a time. So one thing that I would do is just form a shape like that, hold all 3 notes down, and then practice raking through it with different fingers. So you could go pointer finger raking through it, middle finger raking through it. But at first I would just do it with one finger. Then add them together. So you'll hear this in Jocko's version of Blackbird. It'd help if I had enough frets to do that. You probably won't be able to do that on the U bass for the fact that it doesn't have enough strings, but that's a good place to hear it. I use it a lot when I'm playing Pink Floyd's Money. So literally, you're hitting this first note, then you're raking through that pattern I just talked about, but you're on the 2nd fret on the A string, 4th fret on the D string, and 4th fret on the G string. So that's a place where I use that raking motion a lot. But it comes in handy. Obviously, Jocko's, he's raking through all 3 strings and then hitting a single note with his middle finger afterwards. So that's a really cool one. And if you have a full scale electric bass, or if you have a short scale electric bass with more frets, then I'd recommend learning Jocko's version of Blackbird, or at least just the first little bit of it, maybe not the whole song, just to practice raking. I think it's a really good exercise. It's a fun way to do it. So that's raking. I don't think we really need to go much more in detail. You can follow up raking through strings with another note like Jocko did, or you can practice alternate raking and just try to get an even sound between them. So an even spacing. I think the hardest part here is getting that even sound. So you just want to make sure you're spacing each note out evenly. You may want to practice this with like 8th notes on, going 1 and 2, 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and. But you get the idea. You're just spacing them out evenly. Click, 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 very evenly spaced, very consistent. I think that's a good skill to have. So see, that wasn't super consistent, but you get the idea. Yeah, so raking is a really good technique that gets used a lot. So I highly recommend that one for adding to your solos, because it's almost like sweep picking. You know, when guitar players do sweep picking, it's a very similar idea to raking. And actually, Adam Nitti, he's a bass player that does he'll do sweep picking, and he sweeps by going down with the thumb and then raking up with the pointer finger, down, up, right. And I have a video on this somewhere. So what I'm doing here is combining the tapping that we were talking about earlier. Although the intonation's really bad on my U bass way up high up here on the Wanderer. All right. But yeah, LC, congratulations on that one. That was a really, really good price. And Novix 37, I had a heading. I got it around that price as well. I think I got mine for like 136 or something after shipping fees and whatnot. And you know, that's the one that I gave away a while ago. And that one was a lot of fun. It was actually a pretty good instrument. I didn't really have any qualms with it. I may have had to do a truss rod adjustment to get like a buzz out of one spot on the neck or something, but it wasn't much adjusting at all. It was actually a pretty good deal. Yeah. All right, so that's raking. And then now our last one, we've got two that I'm going to include in this just because they're both just like finger plucking kinds of things. So obviously, if you're wanting to do metal and things of that nature, it's less of a solo thing. So I'm just going to briefly talk about this one. You can use 3 fingers in a row. It's a good way to play faster and use less energy while you're doing it. So all I'm doing there is just going ring finger, middle finger, index finger, and trying to get it to where I can do it faster. You'll see a lot of metal guys like this, like Steve Harris from Iron Maiden. I'm pretty sure he uses 3 fingers. Once again, this kind of thing works better on the metal strings because it's easier to be consistent when your fingers don't stick to the strings. I have calluses on these 2 fingers, so they don't stick quite as much. But when I start using that 3rd finger, it has less of a callus, and so it'll squash a little bit more and stick to the string a little bit more. So something to keep in mind. There's not really much to say about that except for the same thing about start slow and really work it in, getting it even. Ring, middle, index, ring, middle, index. You'll notice my pinky kind of moves with the ring finger. I'm not actually doing anything with it. It's just a natural thing because there's like some sort of tendon or something that connects both of those. So when you move your ring finger, your pinky just kind of goes along with it. But it's not actually hitting a string. I know that could be confusing sometimes when you're just watching the video. All right, and so then last but not least, I use this a lot in a lot of my solo pieces and just to try to get a nice sound. Most of the time when we're playing bass, we're playing one note at a time, and we don't really want the notes to ring out that much because they really just clash with each other. But if we're playing certain chords, and if we're playing higher up on the neck, we may want to use these 3 fingers and potentially even the ring finger as well to finger pick like a ukulele player or a guitar player would. So that's kind of like instead of having your hand over like this, you have it angled slightly. Your thumb gets whatever the lowest string you're playing is. Your pointer finger will get the next string. Your middle finger will get the next one. And rather than plucking with this part of the fingertip, you're plucking with kind of the side over here. So hopefully that gives you all the idea. I could even do this probably if it'll stay focused. So this comes in handy when you have little chord things. Yeah, so you get the idea. You can kind of do a melody. Yeah, and so that's kind of just another technique that you can add to that. So right now what I'm doing is playing a melody where I'm essentially starting from this fifth root position, like a power chord on guitar for those guitar players. And then you can use your pinky to play higher notes, and your middle finger is open so it can play notes kind of in between, and you can have a nice little melody where you go while doing the chord. And then if you want to, you can change up your shape. Yeah, so you get the idea. You can kind of come up with melodies like that. Just something kind of fun to do. Hopefully that's helping. It looks like the comments over here became a really, really big thread about the Hadin. Oh, and that's cool. You got the one with the steel strings. I haven't tried the steel strings on that instrument, so that might be pretty cool. But yeah, if you have the steel strings, practice doing that Steve Harris kind of gallop. It's easier to be consistent on the metal strings. Awesome. All right, so do you guys have any questions about any of these techniques? Was there anything I went over too quickly that didn't really make sense, or just questions about where to take it from here? I might give you one little like exercise on the finger picking that we did at the end. Try going thumb, index, middle, index. So you're going A string, D string, G string, D string. So you're getting that pattern. So it's like you're going down each string in a row and then back up each string. Thumb, index, middle, index, thumb, index, middle, index. Or you could try doing middle, index, thumb over and over again. That one's kind of nice. And then you could also do thumb, index, middle, thumb, index, middle. Experiment with different chord shapes over here. Right now I'm doing like a major chord shape where I'm going root of whatever scale I'm in, third, and then octave. Root, third, and that octave of the root. So I'm doing a C, E, and then a C on the G string. Or third fret on the A string, second fret on the D string, and fifth fret on the G string. And then what I was doing after that was I was doing a D minor 7 chord after that. But yeah, that's just some kind of like exercise kind of thing that you can do on there. You could also do this with tenths, starting and doing the G major scale in tenths, but just add an open D string in the middle of each one. So that'll sound kind of like Blackbird. Not really, but kind of, you know. So you do that. So that's another thing you can do here. You can play 2 notes at the same time and then 1 note separate. And you can practice doing 3 notes at the same time where you're plucking thumb, pointer finger, and middle finger all at the same time. So let's go back to this C power chord where we're doing 3rd fret on the A string, 5th fret on the D string, and 5th fret on the G string. So we're holding all 3 of those down at the same time. And then we're just going to pluck all 3 at the same time. You try just plucking the outer ones to get that octave. So you do outer, then just the pointer finger in the middle. So that's these two strings, then that, and that's hard to see. It looks like my thumb's doing an extra thing, but really it just moves down once. So those two at the same time, and the pointer. So you can try all these different orders. All right, so that's the idea. So I noticed on here someone said, I heard steel strings wear out the frets. I imagine that would happen so slowly over time, and if you're playing enough to do that, you'll probably be buying multiple instruments just for the fun of it. You probably won't go and I mean, I've never gone and replaced the frets on any instrument that I've had. Most of the strings have a different coating to them, though. Like the Kala ones have silver plating to them, and I wonder if that's to not hit the frets as hard. That might be to not wear the frets out as much. But I had the silver plated round wounds on my Kala Exotic Mahogany now for 3 years, and I've played that one a lot. You can see it on a lot of Rock Class 101 covers. If you've ever been to that website, it's a ukulele website that my friend runs. And I've also used it on a lot of stuff here. Obviously, the first U-bass video I ever posted on here was Canon and D on the Exotic Mahogany. And that was in 2017, around this time. I've literally had it for about 3 years and a month, or 3 years and 2 months, somewhere in that range. And the frets are fine. So I don't think you'll really have a whole bunch to worry about with that, unless you're really abusing it and doing a lot of bends and slides and crazy stuff and really digging into the frets just for no reason. I don't think you'll have an issue with that. So so that's my take on it. But yeah, you can always replace them if so. I think that would be too much of a hassle for me. Honestly, with $100-something instrument at that point, if the frets had worn out, probably just buy another one if they're still that cheap. Yeah. All right. So we've got that. Does anybody have any questions about any of these techniques, though? So I see a lot of things about the different bases and stuff, and getting good deals on things. Speaking of good deals on things, I want to mention something kind of silly, because I did this and noticed the cord that I have on here. This is a First Act cable. If you're familiar with the brand First Act, they sell them in like Toys, or they used to sell them in Toys R Us. I bought this one at Toys R Us before they closed. And, they sell them at probably Target and maybe even Walmart now. But I think I've definitely seen them at Target. Anyway, this was like a $9 cable. And I've used it on like every gig since I got it in 2014 or 2015, somewhere around there. It's never shorted out, and it's been a great cable. And it was like under $10, and it was like I want to say a 15-foot long cable. I can't remember if it was 15 or 20 feet. So kind of silly, but I felt like that was a really good deal, considering I'm still using it for live streams. I'm still using it for all those other things. Do you prefer black or white polyurethane strings? I think I prefer the blacks. So I don't know with the Aquila Thunder Blacks how much different they are from the Thunder Guts, the white strings. I'm really not sure how different those two are. I imagine they're fairly similar. The Kala strings have a totally different vibe to them. So it may be that, I don't know this for sure. The Aquila ones, since they're both called Thunder something, then I think they might not be as different from one another. But the Kala ones have a much warmer vibe. They have a little bit less string noise, but they don't stay in tune as well. So it's kind of like you have a trade between those different ones. So as far as looks, on this particular model, I like the white strings better. But for the solid body ones and for some of the other ones, I would probably prefer the black strings. But also tone-wise, they're different. So if you get the Kala ones, they'll have like a warmer tone, and it'll get more, to me, it sounds more like an upright bass, but you have less punch. So you have a warmer tone, but less punch. And then with Thunder Guts, you have more punch, but you also have more string noise with that punch. So I kind of like the other ones, even though I don't have any on any of mine. I just have what they came with, because you get a warmer vibe. So the tone is just smoother in a lot of ways. However, I've heard they go out of tune a lot, and that you have to stretch them a little more at first to get them to be on there and everything. Well, hey, thanks for sticking on, Navix. Appreciate you, and appreciate all the questions you asked. They were great questions. And Charlie, I'll keep calling you Charlie for now, I guess. I'm glad that you got to catch one of these too. It was good seeing your name pop up on there as well. So, so yeah, there are advantages to both. If you don't like having to tune as often, then Thunderguts. If you like the punchy sound, Thunderguts. And if you like a kind of smoother sound with slightly less string noise, I would say go with the Pahoehoes, or however you pronounce them. But that's the idea. All right. So does anybody else have any questions about anything? Appreciate everybody kind of sticking around here. I'm going to try to do a little piece that combines all of the techniques that we did. Problem is I'm going to try to make up a technique. Or not a technique, a song. I'm trying to make up a song that uses all the techniques. So we'll see. It's kind of an improvised sort of thing. But basically, I'm going to combine the down and up with the thumb. And instead of pluck, pluck, it's almost like I'm finger styling, but I'm doing down, up with the thumb. So not my best song, but you get the idea. I'm using down and up with the thumb at the beginning. That's that raking. That's that finger style. So you can do the same thing with a lot of these techniques. You could do fingerstyle here, or you could rake through it, depending on what tone you like. wanted to, you could do. So you can combine all those things to add little solo sections in songs, or just kind of make something nice. If I spent more time, I could like turn this all into one big thing, you know. So it's kind of nice to start with an idea in mind. So I was thinking I'm going to do stuff in C major basically, and so started with Raking. And I might make it develop into a finger picking pattern. Whoops. Right, so you can make up things there. And then, of course, you could add a part that has a backbeat to it. So it's really hard to combine all of them at the same time in the same phrase, but if I spent more time and kind of like planned it out, it might be kind of fun to do that. So if you'd like to see me do stuff like that, it might help a little bit to have more time and actually notate it out and write it out rather than just trying to come up with it. But hopefully that was a good enough example of how you can use all these things to make a solo, or to add to whatever you're doing, add to a solo, or add to a just a song, even a bass line, like if you're doing the Raking. So you could have something like that, and then someone could play on top of it too. And then, of course, from other videos, we have harmonics that we could add on top. Notice when I do these little harmonic things where I'm playing notes here, but harmonics on the D and the G string, I'm kind of doing the finger picking too. Sometimes I'll rake through the harmonics into that, and Jocko did that a lot too in a lot of songs. So just something to keep in mind. You can do all those different things, mix them together, mix and match certain ones. They don't all go together back to back. So that's why I was even trying to like separate them out into into almost like different themes. But you could have it where, like, for instance, the tapping might just continue up a pattern that you couldn't continue up on, you know, one string with Raking, for instance. So you might be going like, right? So that way you kind of have that combination of doing fingerstyle or Raking. Ooh, I kind of like that. I'm gonna have to turn that into something later on. What I'm doing here is I'm tapping, pulling off, and then continuing it as a rake down. That's kind of cool. So if I came up with a chord progression and kind of went over that and made a full melody that could be done that way, that might be a cool little song. And see how it fills out the sound. So you have the chord, it's like the lowest notes, your bass line, whatever it's doing, and you have a melody on top. Just doing something like that. So that's the idea. And then if you really wanted to, you could combine all that with the backbeat, although I believe it would be really, really hard in that case because you have so much stuff going on. Yeah, let's not even try that. Yeah, so that'd be pretty hard to do and would probably take a whole lot of time to make it sound good. But you get the idea. So any questions about any of those techniques or how to combine them or anything about the U-bass, just any other random questions that you guys have? If not, I'm going to go ahead and head out, but I'll give you a minute to just come up with one or two. So if you have any final questions, just go ahead and leave them on here. And otherwise, I will see you guys next week on Tuesday. And I'll have a new video for you out then. And I believe I'm going to do a Patreon request that day. I know I have one or two in the works that that are ready, a couple of requests. And then on Thursday, I'll have another live video for you. So that's it for today, unless I see one come in the next 5, 4, 3, 2. All right, guys, save it for next time if you have a question. And I will see you guys later on. Have a good week and be safe.